In the last two modules, we looked at this idea that a lot of what we do when we make decisions, when we make inferences, when we operate in the real world, involves implicit assumptions, structure that comes from our environment, or it comes from the way that our brain was set up, or how we developed, how we were acculturated, and that oftentimes these assumptions work perfectly fine, but sometimes they can lead to mistakes, and oftentimes they are things that we really haven't considered very closely at all. We haven't looked at the evidence for or against them. We haven't looked at how consistently they fit into our overall view of the world. And philosophy, as a discipline, engages in the examination of values, ways in which we conceptualize the world, basic beliefs, desires, and so on. And so in doing so, it encourages us to rationally evaluate these fundamental components of our worldview and reshape our worldview into a more rational, consistent, comprehensive, and systematic view about the nature of ourselves, of society, of the universe, and how we fit into society and into the universe. So in this module, we're going to turn our attention to some practical advice Perry and his co-authors give students about how to study philosophy. And in particular, they focus on how to read philosophical texts. So on page 4, we get the following quotation. To read philosophy well, one must read slowly and aggressively. Good philosophers develop arguments and theories of some intricacy, arguments that are designed to convince the reader of the author's position on important issues. Reading such works is valuable insofar as one grapples with the ideas, fighting not only to understand the author, but also, once one does, fighting with him or her for control of one's mind. Now, when you read that passage, you might think to yourself that what Perry and his co-authors are advocating is that you should be contrary. You should always be disagreeing. That good philosophers are people that just disagree with what everyone says, tax everyone's position, and so on. But that's not really what they are suggesting here. When they talk about reading aggressively, when they talk about fighting for control of one's mind, those phrases do kind of suggest that way of conducting oneself. But it's not really what they're after. The idea here is that when you come to a philosophy text, the author has a view, a position. They are sharing that view and position with you, but equally importantly, they are sharing reasons why they think that view is the correct view, the best view, the most advanced view. And so when you read a philosophy text, unlike when you read a lot of work where you're just trying to get data or content out of it, you need to go in and to read that article, trying to figure out what the reasons are that the author presents for their thesis and why it is that the author thinks that those reasons provide you with good evidence for adopting their view. Better evidence than one would have for adopting another view. And so one has to look at the structure of the reasons, and one has to evaluate the evidential weight of those reasons in order to understand and get benefit from a philosophy text. And in this way, it is much more active. Maybe active is a better word than aggressive reading than we normally think of. And the next couple of quotes, I think, illustrate this point. So on page 4, Perry and the co-authors also say, and when one learns from reading philosophy, it should be the result of being forced to think through new ideas and grasp new concepts, not simply uploading a data file from the text to the mind. So reading philosophy isn't just about getting information. It's about getting structures, understanding reasons. And for that reason, philosophy can be very hard reading for students who aren't used to doing that sort of reading. Similarly, as one reads a good philosophy article, the original ideas, broad themes, and central conclusions will be apparent. Now, I hope that's true. I don't think it's as true as they suggest here. But beneath, there will be a solid structure of close argumentation, where the philosopher gives you reasons for adopting her view and for rejecting the views of others. So again, the idea here is to really get benefit, to really understand a philosophy article. You don't just have to understand the ideas, the themes, or the central conclusions. What you really need to understand is how the author presents a case for their conclusions and against alternatives. And so when you read philosophy, when you read it, according to their term, aggressively, but I would suggest maybe more actively, it's these things that you want to look at. What are the reasons? Are they good reasons? How much evidence do they provide me? How much do they tip me towards one view as opposed to another view? Now, in the next section, we'll turn to talking about some of the skills that Perry and his co-authors think are important for being a good philosopher, both a good consumer of philosophy and a good producer of philosophy.